Welcome, everybody, to the Multi-Stakeholder Forum to End Plastics Pollution. If you'd like to take your seats, if you would like to stop talking, and join the forum. My name is Femi Oke. I am your plenary MC. I also want to greet and give a very warm welcome to all of our attendees who are attending online virtually. Thank you for doing that. Please take a seat. Our forum is beginning. Very good. Excellent. I see people moving towards seats being filled. This is perfect. All right. This November, we are making history. You are making history. You are part of the first intergovernmental negotiating committee. And if a legally binding instrument is to be found by 2024 to either end or reduce plastic pollution, we need the best brains, which is why we have you online and why we have you here in this forum. This is not a conference where you look at the stage. This is a conference where you participate. You are the conference. Let me tell you what is coming up in the next few hours and the entire program for today. We will start with the science and scientists talking about the entire plastics cycle. We will also have, and this is the main part of our day, 2 huge roundtable sessions in this space, in our conference room here, and also online as well. So online participants, you will have 2 roundtable sessions. We will have 2 roundtable sessions here. I will give you more information about those roundtable sessions a little bit later on in our opening program. But first, we are going to be doing a lot of talking, discussing, sharing of ideas. And I need you to know each other. So turn around to somebody that you do not know and say, buenos dias, good morning, however you want to greet them. Go ahead, but it has to be somebody you do not know, because I'm looking. Online, jump into the chat. I'm sure you've been doing this already. Tell people who you are and where you're from and why you're in the forum virtually. Very good. I love the fact that we're already talking. So do you not have somebody to discuss something with? The gentleman behind may want to talk to you as well. Just give him a greeting. Buenos dias. Fantastic. Wonderful. I feel good about the discussions we're about to have. You're so good at talking. All right. I'm going to end the greeting now. There's some serious networking going on. This was just hello, but obviously I had you at hello. All right. More to come. But to officially welcome you, I timed how long it would take our VIP ministerial guest to get from his seat here to the lectern here. It takes 25 seconds. I timed it earlier on this morning. I timed it so that you could keep going for 25 seconds of applause as I welcome Minister Adrian Penna, Minister of Environment for Uruguay. 25 seconds of applause starts now. Welcome, Minister. Oh, are you getting tired already? It's just the beginning of the day. De nada.
Muy bien, bueno, muy buenos días. Bienvenidos a Uruguay. Es un gusto recibirles. Estamos a sus órdenes. Es un gusto para nosotros ser anfitriones de esta tan importante reunión. Es para nosotros un honor inaugurar este foro abierto de todas las partes interesadas para el intercambio de información y actividades relacionadas con la contaminación por plástico. Agradecemos muy especialmente al Programa de Naciones Unidas para el Medio Ambiente todos los esfuerzos para que este foro y la primera reunión de negociación de plásticos sean posibles. Hoy estamos aquí integrantes de distintos sectores, representando diferentes visiones sobre un mismo tema, la contaminación por plástico y cómo abordar este problema, y es entre todos que juntos construiremos las soluciones a este nuevo desafío global. El uso del plástico se ha incrementado en distintas aplicaciones desde la segunda mitad del siglo XX por las cualidades en cuanto a su precio, por ser liviano y por su resistencia. Este material ha desempeñado un rol importante en el desarrollo de la sociedad y en la búsqueda de soluciones, pero hoy este material ha tenido un uso creciente y ese crecimiento ha sido indiscriminado para aplicaciones de muy baja vida útil, lo que desencadenó también graves problemas ambientales y es uno de los ejemplos más claros de un proceso de consumo insostenible, ese proceso de consumo basado en usar y tirar, como es el caso de la vajilla descartable, los sorbitos, las bolsas, las bandejas, los films y todos los envases y embalajes en general y en particular los no retornables. El bajo costo de estos materiales ha hecho que estén presentes prácticamente en todas partes, generando graves problemas ambientales, posicionando en la actualidad como uno de los desafíos ambientales más importantes. La producción anual de fibras y resinas plásticas ha tenido un crecimiento sostenido e ininterrumpido, aumentando de 2 millones de toneladas en 1950 a más de 400 millones de toneladas en la actualidad. Y esta cifra, si no hacemos algo, se duplicará de cara al 2030 y se volverá a duplicar de cara al 2050. Se estima que algo así como el 36% de la producción anual de plástico se destina a la fabricación de envases, es decir, a productos de muy baja vida útil. Por otra parte, el aumento sostenido de la producción de plásticos está acompañado de un aumento continuo de la generación de los residuos. Adicionalmente, debemos tener en cuenta que los plásticos vienen acompañados de una variedad de aditivos para mejorar su desempeño. Varias de las sustancias tienen características peligrosas para la salud y para el ambiente, y algunos de ellos pueden plantear además problemas al final de la vida útil. Hay mucho aún que desconocemos sobre el plástico y sobre los efectos del plástico en la salud y en el ambiente. Seguramente en este proceso se presenten situaciones y perspectivas diferentes, expectativas y, por qué no, temores. Y eso es lo que nos va a enriquecer en el marco de este diálogo, escuchar las distintas campanas y atender los múltiples aspectos y las dimensiones que esta amplia temática tiene. Está en todos nosotros que los resultados de esta primera reunión sean exitosos y que este primer llamamiento que hacemos es muy importante. Más allá de las diferencias, debemos encontrar los consensos para avanzar en transformar este modelo insostenible de producción y consumo de plástico, tender lazos y puentes, asumir las responsabilidades, comprender todas las aristas del problema y lograr, entre todos, construir un instrumento fuerte, eficaz y justo. El desafío de combatir el incremento indiscriminado de uso de plástico y los problemas ambientales y de salud que este patrón de producción y consumo genera no puede llevarse adelante en forma aislada. Debe abordarse solamente a través de la implementación de políticas globales. No lo puede hacer cada país en particular. Un tratado global permitirá aunar esfuerzos entre todos para lograr una producción y consumo sostenible, donde el plástico sea un producto utilizado para aquellas aplicaciones que realmente sean estrictamente necesarias y se detenga el incremento exponencial de producción que este producto tiene. No alcanza con decir o proponernos metas ambiciosas de reciclaje de material, sino que además debemos claramente trabajar en aspectos vinculados al diseño de los productos, reducir sensiblemente el consumo, sobre todo de los denominados plásticos de un solo uso. Es un problema global que nos atañe a todos, a los políticos, responsables de definir la política pública y el desarrollo con instrumentos eficaces, pero también a las compañías responsables de poner los productos en el mercado de consumo y a los consumidores, que deben ser conscientes que tenemos que cambiar nuestros hábitos. Si estamos todos unidos en esta pelea, los resultados a los que podemos aspirar son mucho más ambiciosos. Trabajar en pro de un acuerdo global nos permitirá acordar una única dirección entre todos los países y lograr el compromiso que todos, sin excepción, aunaremos esfuerzos para lograr la producción y consumo sostenido del plástico. Promoverá la investigación y el desarrollo de productos alternativos que puedan cumplir las mismas funciones con menos impacto ambiental. Deberá movilizar recursos para fortalecer los procesos de generación de conocimiento que nos permita tomar decisiones fundadas sobre los problemas y las posibles soluciones. Recursos que además deberán estar disponibles para apoyar a los países con menos recursos, con menos capacidades, para avanzar en la implementación de soluciones. Las experiencias adquiridas a través de otros acuerdos globales de carácter ambiental hacen pensar que este es el camino a seguir y que entre todos debemos trabajar para que los plazos de un acuerdo de estas características sean los más cortos posibles en pro de generar un instrumento que dinamice los procesos de frenar la producción y consumo insostenible de este material. Como sabemos, los tiempos apremian. Debemos estar todos conscientes que el camino será largo, porque abordar problemáticas de estas características implica modificaciones estructurales de la base en las formas de producir y consumir, que seguramente tengan impactos económicos que deberemos atender. Hoy, seguramente conozcamos solamente una parte de los problemas que el plástico en este modelo de producción y consumo ha generado tanto al ambiente como a la salud. El abordaje será constante, el desafío será constante, pero debemos actuar con la información disponible, atendiendo a lograr un cambio sustancial y estructural sobre la producción y el uso de este material. Debemos, entre todos, trabajar para lograr el cambio de paradigma en nuestra concepción y el vínculo con los residuos plásticos desde una mirada de economía circular, participación y responsabilidades compartidas. Una circularidad que nos invita a concebir los residuos como recursos, identificar la oportunidad de transformarlos, apostar a su revalorización y buscar como primer paso minimizar su existencia. Una circularidad que también nos interpela y nos invita a repensar nuestros hábitos de consumo, nuestras prácticas y la responsabilidad que nos toca a cada uno en cada caso. Pero sobre todo, y muy especialmente, nos invita a la acción, a ser parte de ese cambio cultural. Y a eso los invitamos, a la acción, a transformar esto en hechos y a ser todos parte de este cambio fundamentalmente cultural. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Minister. Jyoti Mata Philip, what a journey we're about to embark on. I was speaking to her just a few moments ago. This is the beginning. It's right at the very beginning. Jyoti Mata Philip is the Executive Secretariat of the INC for Plastic Pollution. Please make her very welcome as she enters the stage and joins us at the lectern. Thank you, Jyoti. Welcome. Okay, one word to describe how you're feeling right now. Excited.
Excited to start this journey.
Fantastic. Over to you.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. Good morning and greetings to all of those who are also online. Ladies and gentlemen, you are very welcome to this Multi-Stakeholder Forum that is being convened before the start of the INC, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, to develop an international legally binding agreement on plastic pollution, including the marine environment. Before I start or say anything else, I would like to thank, on behalf of all of us, the government and people of Uruguay for giving us such a warm welcome to their country and this beautiful town of Punta del Este, which I hope you will get to see a little bit. And also to thank His Excellency, Mr. Nelson Adrián Peña, Minister of Environment of Uruguay, for joining us in this forum. We are here today because earlier this year, at the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly in Nairobi, member states adopted a resolution to create a legally binding agreement. We will hear more about that as we go through the day and the year and the week that is coming up, as well as the years ahead, because we have a very fast journey up to 2024. So also by the same resolution, the Executive Director of UNEP was requested to convene this forum so that we all can dialogue, learn from each other, and exchange knowledge amongst each other. As you know, this is a fully hybrid meeting and forum, and I would like to welcome all the 2,000 participants who are attending this meeting in person and online. I am so surprised to see such a full room today. It is very heartwarming to know that so many stakeholders are going to be engaged in this journey that we take together. Similar numbers are expected for INC1, and it is a testament, a real testament to the interest that this first session of the INC and the forum are generating, as well as the journey we're going to take together. Through this process, we're highlighting the active and constructive engagement of all stakeholders for an ambitious and meaningful outcome of the INC process. I am delighted to note the very varied and broad scope of participants at this forum, which will inform the rich discussions that I hope will take place here in the plenary, in the roundtables, and back here in plenary later on. Plastics is so central to our economy that all of us in this room, and I mean it, all of us in this room, are crucial and have a role to play to achieve transformation in our economy and to innovate, to exchange knowledge, to dialogue. All of this is important with everyone in this room today. This is not just about ending an environmental threat. It is about creating new economic opportunities and alleviating poverty with new business models, new and alternative designs, materials and products, social and policy innovation to nudge behavioral change in actions of different stakeholders all along the plastics life cycle, and a level of innovation to find new pathways for modern, inclusive, networked multilateralism to give a broader set of stakeholders a voice. Ideas and voices must circulate before plastics can circulate. We need each of our perspectives to identify those actions that can be most effective to end plastic pollution, and on how an effective global agreement can help in fostering their improvement. And crucially, we will need all of you and all of us together to work together. It is important that negotiators hear your voices and see your ambition, as well as understand how global instrument could further increase the effectiveness of your actions and remove hurdles which are impeding you to go beyond. Today is a live experiment to bring your voices to this process. We are learning together and trust that you will take this opportunity to join forces in this endeavor. We also need a multi-stakeholder action agenda to help us shift the needle on plastic pollution with measurable collective impact. There are many existing and successful initiatives on plastic pollution. We have a lot to learn from these, but we need to increase the level of our ambition and efforts if we are to significantly turn the tide. Concerted and bold action by all of us together is needed to address plastic pollution and must continue to be scaled up. At UNEP, we are very much in favor of the forum and the multi-stakeholder engagement to continue throughout the 2 short years we have to negotiate an effective agreement. I wish you all much inspiration and goodwill to build the necessary collaboration to make this a truly effective piece of the puzzle. You are in the right place to make things happen. The work starts now. Be bold, ambitious, and open about your efforts, your goals, and your progress in ending plastic pollution. Thank you so much.
Our multi-stakeholder forum is going to be based and grounded in science. That's how we're going to start our forum. What does the science tell us about plastic pollution? Here to unpack a science document from the INC, we have Sheila Agarwal Khan. She's director of the Economy Vision Department at UNEP. Sheila, hello, welcome. Nice to have you. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with a very simple slide. Whoops. Am I at the wrong slide? Lovely, thank you. So I'm going to start with a very simple slide here, just about what is today's plastics economy about. And as all of you know, plastics are critical to the economy. From our phones, the little digit here that I'm holding, the pens that you're working with, everything that you see around has plastics in it. So no question there, it's critical for the economy and critical for jobs. And here I want to mention the millions of workers in informal settings, critical in the waste collection space, who must become a part of any new economy that we would work towards. But I also want to talk about the material use. Plastics, the chemicals that get added in to create the kinds of flexibility and workings that we need of the various commodities are a critical space, but we're seeing lots of human and environmental impacts. And the evidence has been growing. If you look at the research out there, it shows growing evidence of human impacts. At one point, it was just thought that, okay, plastics decompose into microplastics and then they become part of soil. But now we're seeing the kind of changes that are caused right in our own systems, our hormonal systems being affected. At one point, there was research talking about affecting female reproductive systems. Now male reproductive systems is the latest research we're seeing on human impacts and what it does to our endocrine in terms of our disrupting our endocrine system. And then we see environmental impacts, impacts to wildlife, impacts to ecosystems. On top of that, the production process is not that resource efficient. There's a lot of waste. We have a linear economy where plastic is produced and waste is the end result. And so there's a lot of waste accumulated, not just on land spaces, but that makes its way into rivers, lakes, and ultimately into the oceans, where it causes further environmental impacts. And then greenhouse gas production. If you then delve down deeper into, from that very simple picture, into, let's say, the reality of the economy, it's actually very complex. So right, if you see, and I know you won't be able to read a lot of the very fine print, but if you look at the rows at the top, the first one, the orange one on plastic production, more than 90% of plastics comes from fossil fuel. And we need to be looking at the whole cycle. If you were to look at the life cycle, it starts with primarily fossil fuel in the production, where the petrochemical industry works to producing the polymers, and then converters come in and add chemicals into it to give it the kind of, let's say, the function that we need, whether in packaging, whether in buildings and construction, transport, consumer goods, textiles. And so you see in blue the areas where it is used by brands and retailers. Then we go to plastic waste, where a lot of this plastic, 60% of the plastic waste is coming from packaging, but then a very big portion from the buildings and construction sector. And then after that, transport. And a lot of this plastic, some of it goes straight away. You buy it in the supermarket and your garbage at home is filling up with plastic. Personally, I'm shocked at how much plastic I create because I think that I'm more environmentally sensitive than other people. And by 3 or 4 days, my garbage is full because, I was rushing and I didn't pick the vegetables that I had to put into a bag, that didn't come with plastic around it. I just picked what I found straight away, and it was just this volume of plastic every week that accumulates. So as a consumer who buys things and food and drinks and all, I still end up with a lot of plastic. And that's for everything, from the PVC pipes and all that are going into construction to much of what you see everywhere, whether you're driving a car, whether the clothes you wear, this could be plastic. So we have a society right now that we've analyzed that has, yes, there is recycling, there is waste collection and management, but it's minuscule compared to the size of the waste in there. And ultimately, that makes its way into the environment, whether into oceans, whether into our food and water systems. Ultimately, it's just circulating. Microplastics circulating in water, circulating in the air. You can't get rid of it if the tests that have been done by scientists show that when you open your tap and you look at it, there's plastics that are microplastics in the water systems, whether in the tap or in the water bottles that you buy. And this issue is growing. So global plastic production is increasing exponentially. If you look at that pie chart, the reddish-orange figure shows the amount of discarded plastics. So half of the plastics that we see are actually discarded. But member states recognize this, and they came together at the UN Environment Assembly, and they put forward a resolution that says they want a comprehensive approach that looks at the full life cycle of plastics. And they want to shift the economy to one that is a resource-efficient, circular economy. So the key question we asked is, well, actually, can you shift from a linear economy to a circular one? The diagram I showed you, plastic production, use, waste, and then its way into the environment, is very much linear. You produce, and ultimately, it goes down the chain into waste. So can you shift it? So we looked at, as we analyzed, what does it take to shift this line or linear approach to one that is circular? We looked at the full life cycle and said, where can you have loops that allow you to turn this economy into one that is circular, from when you extract resources to how the chemicals are produced, to what you see in blue, where it's designed into products, distributed, used, consumed. Can it go back into a circle where it gets reused over and over? And even when waste is produced, can it be recycled so that it loops back into plastic production? So to make it simpler for the analysis, we divided it into 3 areas. Upstream on the top left, what we call midstream, which is where it's used by brands, retailers, consumers, and then what we call downstream, which is the waste end of things, where you either recycle or reuse it, or you incinerate it and lose the resource, or just simply landfill it or dump it. But we use this kind of a, let's say, a categorization, which is our own categorization. I know there are some players who look at product design much later and call it upstream. But we wanted to start right at the stage where fossil fuels are extracted and then converted into plastics, and that's what we named as upstream. And if you look at that, we did a life cycle analysis using a methodology that has been worked and tested thousands of times, and we applied it to the plastics solution problem. And we looked at what are the kinds of problems in the plastics life cycle that could be sorted out. Well, the first thing is reducing the size of the problem. It is such a big problem that if you make the problem smaller, you can eliminate a lot of the different challenges that you see. So you eliminate unnecessary plastics. The Minister of Environment said, we don't need single-use plastics. You don't need to buy something, get a bag, and dump it straight away. It has zero use. How do you eliminate the most unnecessary plastics very fast? But there is also the elimination of problematic plastics, because right from the start, if you put harmful chemicals into the plastics that are produced, it becomes very hard to recycle them. Whether they are multi-layer plastics, whether they are plastics with harmful chemicals, recycling then becomes a big challenge. So how do you rethink the design at this stage of the life cycle so that when it comes to recycling, it becomes easier to recycle it or to reuse it over and over again? There is a lot of talk among many different actors here about recycled content, but a lot of concern that actually you cannot get to recycled content if you don't have plastics that can be recycled. So right from the start, they have to be designed for being able to be recycled, which means looking at the additives issue, looking at unnecessary plastics. Second, how do you design for circularity? So reusing it. How do you design a product that can withstand reuse over and over again without it disintegrating, so that you don't have a bottle or a product that once you use it, it's already disintegrating, or that it cannot be reused because it has certain chemicals, or that it has so many layers of different types of materials that separating it out for recycling is impossible. But there are many uses right now and lots of excitement about trying reusability and recyclability and compostability. And I think if we were to ask questions around this room, we would find all of us have a slightly different definition. I was given a book one day and told, here is a recyclable book, and it was plastics. And I thought, wow, imagine if I have to put that into a recycling bin. Nobody will be able to recycle it because they'll think it's paper, and yet it was plastics. And then I heard about, well, actually, plastic waste is going to be used for fuel for the transport industry. And I thought, is that really called reuse or recyclability? And then there were others who told me, well, actually, this plastic just disintegrates into microplastic, and it'll become part of the soil. And we'll call it compostability. And so I think that it's going to be critical as we go forward to look at issues of what are the definitions that are really making something reusable, recyclable, or compostable. The third thing that came through the life cycle analysis showed that to be able to have a circular plastics economy, you have to be able to recirculate plastics, meaning that once they circulate in the economy, they must recirculate over and over. And that means you could use refill and reuse systems. You go into a store, and instead of getting a new bottle or a new container that you dump, where after you're finished, actually you take it back and you refill it. The issue about right to repair and take back systems, things like these phones where I don't dump it, but I can take it back and get another one, while these materials that are used in here get repurposed for the next phone. Recycling technologies, lots of questions about this. Mechanical recycling can only so far recycle a certain amount because plastics are not designed to be able to be mechanically recycled easily, which means advanced or chemical recycling is one of the options on the table. But the challenges we're seeing from our analysis is that there are still pollutants coming out of the facilities. There are still greenhouse gas emissions. So how do you align with the Paris Agreement if we have technologies like this? Are there newer technologies that can address some of these concerns? Is there a space there for innovation? And then lastly, well, even today, you're going to have plastics in the environment, and tomorrow probably we'll still have plastics that have not been recycled. So what do we do with those plastics? And there needs to be some consideration about what happens to plastics that have leaked into the environment. How do you collect that? How do you manage that? What kind of technologies? How do you manage the waste in a country which doesn't have facilities? Or with a country that does have facilities, can that system of trading plastics be expedited in some way? And the Basel Convention has set up some norms, and I know there are questions about how do you use that system in a way that would make sense for the Plastics Treaty. Lastly, trade. So over $1 trillion worth of trade happens in the plastic space, but there are still considerations of greenhouse gas emissions. What does it mean for the waste burden? Is it solving the problem? And something for everyone to think about is how does trade take place in a way that incentivizes circular plastics and disincentivizes other kinds of plastics. So from this life cycle analysis, based on a lot of different scenarios looked at, in some of the good scenarios we see an 80% reduction of plastic pollution if we are able to move from a linear to a circular plastics economy, a net gain of 700,000 because of jobs that are created in waste management, recycling, in new digitalization technologies that allow you to look at digital marks that enable recycling to happen easier, and for consumers and brands and retailers to know the kinds of material that is found inside a plastic product, and to be able to then also look at the kinds of new jobs that could be created from reuse and refill systems, repair systems, take-back systems. And so our analysis showed net savings, some 700,000 new jobs, and greenhouse gas emission reductions, which you can see more information in the document that you have in front of you for the INC. So to summarize, the life cycle analysis which we carried out based on member states' request of moving from a linear to a circular economy looked at 4 issues that need some consideration: reducing the size of the problem, designing for circularity so that you can design products that can be reused or recycled, recirculating the plastics that are in practice, whether these are reuse refill systems, whether they are take-back systems. Many players we know today are innovating in this space. There are lots of pilots. The key challenge was how to scale those, so to unlock some of the barriers that industry are seeing, to be able to have, let's say, a level playing field that allows them to scale some of these mechanisms. And then managing plastic waste that has not been reused or recycled. Such a system change is going to require harmonized measures, especially given cross-border implications. We are told by many industry players the need for, let's say, streamlined and a level playing field if legislation is across the board, streamlined from country to country. The kinds of enabling conditions, the regulatory space that needs to be put in place for a circular plastics economy, and essentially a more integrated approach which doesn't look at solutions only at one side of this life cycle, but across the full life cycle, so that will create a full change towards a circular plastics economy. So this is our analysis based on actually a number of different institutions that are in fact in the room, whose literature we drew on, some of them the diagrams that we also used in our own analysis, to be able to unpack the kinds of issues and the challenges to be able to move from a linear to a circular economy based on member states' requests. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheila, very much. We are about to meet 4 professors who spend an awful lot of time working out and trying to do research and action into ending plastics pollution. Tricia, would you join me up here on stage? Tricia will be with us on stage, and then virtually we'll have 3 of our professors. This is the part where we stop being looking at what's happening on stage and we start participating. If you're in the room, let me just tell you, on the right-hand side of the microphone, there are 2 buttons. The right-hand side of the microphone, Tricia, take a seat, thank you. The right-hand side of the microphone, that makes your microphone go green, which is like putting your hand up, and then when it goes red, it means that your microphone is live. It also has a number on the table, so I will see which number. So when I call out your number, that is when you have your question that you may well want to put to the professors. Online, I see you. Thank you for joining us. If you put your hand up in the virtual room, I will see it. And then when your microphone and your video is live, you can also be part of the question session. But first of all, let us find out who you're going to be talking to. Tricia, welcome. Please introduce yourself to our forum, please.
Thank you.
Keep talking and it will. It's magic that way.
It's magic like that, okay.
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou, ko Tricia Farrelly aho. I'm Professor Tricia Farrelly, an environmental anthropologist, so I'm a social scientist. So I might have a little bit of a different take on the story than some of the other scientists in the room. I'm particularly interested in the framing of plastic pollution. I'm interested in the definitions that Sheila introduced. And how the concepts and narratives around plastics have been played out since I joined this process at UNEA 3. So very nice to be here, and thank you.
Professor Vina, hello, so good to have you. Please introduce yourself to our forum audience.
Thank you very much, Femi, and good morning, everyone. I'm joining you from beautiful Sydney, where it's just gone past midnight here. So I'm Veena Sahajwala at the University of New South Wales in Sydney and director of the Smart Centre. And we basically look at all kinds of materials and look at how we might be able to recycle, remanufacture, really picking up on some of the things we've heard Sheila talk about, the ability to set up manufacturing technologies based on science that show it is absolutely possible to have circular plastics. So we can bring new innovative ideas to life, and that's what we do at the Smart Centre at UNSW in Sydney. Thank you, Femi.
Professor Alethea, welcome to the forum. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Alethea Vasquez from Mexico City. I'm a professor at a public university here, and I've been working on plastic waste for the last 15 years. And nowadays, I'm widened my work to include all the life cycle of plastics, from production, use, consumption, plastic waste, recycling, and also how plastic ends its life, probably in a landfill or maybe in the environment. Currently, I'm coordinating the National Inventory of Plastics Pollution in Mexico. Thanks.
Thank you. And Professor Alexander, nice to have you. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation, the consideration. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Alexander Turra, professor of the Oceanographic Institute of the University of São Paulo in Brazil, and also the coordinator of the UNESCO Chair on Ocean Sustainability. I have been working with marine litter from science to the elaboration of public policies together with governmental actors, and we are trying to expand this internalization of the issue into the policies at the state level and municipal level and at the federal level, so that we can move on and change our reality in the near future.
Thank you very much, professors. I am thinking, first of all, multi-stakeholder forum on ending plastic pollution. What is the most important detail that we need to share with our forum as we set about our roundtables? This conversation is to really help guide us in this first roundtable session. Tricia, you start.
I think it's very, very important for us to define and understand plastics as a complex chemical mixture. Just as Sheila introduced just before we started this conversation, There are many, many different chemicals that make up plastics. Essentially, if we don't have these chemicals, we don't have plastics. And of course, fossil fuels. The majority of plastics are made of fossil fuels today. Vast, vast majority, over 90%. So I think it's very important to think about plastics in this way, and also acknowledging that there are over 10,000 chemicals that have now been identified in plastics. 2,400 of those have been classified as toxic. So starting in that space, understanding that plastics are lively materials, they're not inert, sort of static, physical materials only, they're much, much more than that. And they create other novel entities, more non-intentionally added substances, create novel ecosystems, introduce pathogens and invasive species as they move along the life cycle. So I invite everybody to think of plastics in that way, and also to think about plastics in their full lifespan as well.
Alexander, your concept of what plastics can be used for and can do is quite radical. Can you share that with the forum, please? Just rethinking what we could do with plastics.
Yeah, quite radical is interesting way to put that. But I think plastics and the discussion of the treaty and the movement we are trying to build up is an opportunity to promote a solidarity and inclusive economy, to reduce inequalities, to promote, to acknowledge diversity, to promote inclusion and equity. Because we have some big differences around the world, considering the global north and the global south, and this treaty would be a tool to alleviate these dissimilarities. But we also have dissimilarities in other special scales. We are talking about regions like South America. We are talking about subnational realities, comparing municipalities, but we are also including in this discussion inequalities within municipalities, comparing neighborhoods and people with different incomes. So, and all of these players are in the pool that we are discussing here. So I think if we consider approaches or tools that can promote or not concentrate more the profits and the possibility to promote prosperity and share prosperity, I think this is a very important approach, because when we talk about plastic pollution, we are not talking only about plastic pollution. We are talking about poverty. We are talking about root problems that also need to be understood and solved.
Alicia, I'm thinking about what the huge task we have today and then going forward in coming up with solutions for what to do with plastics. And your advice is to do what?
Well, we have to understand that we have a huge problem of plastic pollution, but this huge problem requires a combination of multiple solutions. I mean, that's very important. There's no single bullet. It's not only recycling, or not only biodegradation. We have to research each application, each kind of plastic, and also, as Alexander already mentioned, we have to take into consideration the local conditions to find the best solution for each case. And this can be very different from one country to another, or even from one region to another. So it's very important that we have these common agreements and these basic agreements with enough flexibility to allow us to implement the solutions locally. And I think that's very important for all the stakeholders that will be discussing this to keep in mind.
I'm just thinking about the second part of the Multi-Stakeholder Forum, which is to end plastic pollution. And I'm just wondering how much of a compromiser you are, Veena, on the ending plastic pollution part of our forum.
Yeah, Femi, I think definitely if we are going to be able to remove all of that pollution from our environment, from our water, we've got to see these as raw materials that are going to be put into manufacturing, which is going to the heart of the point that I think Sheila was talking about. That circularity of plastics means you've got to take it out from landfills, you've got to take it out from our environment and have a system, a holistic system that allows you to bring these as part of the supply chain for manufacturing products. And to do that, you absolutely have to have innovative solutions, not only to look at manufacturing in a traditional setting, which of course we do have technologies to do that, but also equally importantly, when we talk about informal systems that exist, you need to be able to have different kinds of technologies that can operate successfully at different scales. So to give you an example, the kinds of regional and local solutions to take waste out of our environment, put it into manufacturing, is basically what we call our microfactories. These kinds of solutions, and if I may indulge Femi, holding up some of these plastic filaments, and I'm going to do that because this is made from 100% waste plastics. Now, there are specific kinds of plastics, and without getting into any of those details, the reason why I talk about manufacturing is because if you can convert these into value, which is what this is, you can then feed that into manufacturing different kinds of products. So to take materials that are seen as problematic and pollutants because it's not necessarily got a value attributed to it, you can bring it back into production, enable many communities that are collecting waste and regional and local microfactories, allowing you to create value from waste.
So Veena, you said something that jumped out at me, which is the circularity of plastics. One of the roundtables that we're all about to participate in is circularity in practice. Trisha.
Yeah.
I know why you're asking me this question. We've had a conversation before. So something I'd like us to provoke us to think about is, and again, I think Sheila introduced this somewhat in her presentation as well. For me, again, it's about, the definitions are going to be really important for us to think about in these negotiations, and the question of circularity of plastics. So considering, again, all of these toxicants, these, monomers, oligomers, polymers, additives, catalyzers, residual monomers, processing aids, non-intentionally added substances that we're finding in all plastics, essentially, the question I have for everybody, and I'm hoping everybody will think about, is can we circularize plastics in the way that circular economy was originally intended? In other words, can we circularize plastics so that they are regenerative, restorative, renewable?
Would you answer your own question, Trisha?
Yeah. My answer at the moment is absolutely not. Not with the conventional plastics we have, not with the majority of the plastics produced from fossil fuels, not with the toxic chemicals we're finding in great numbers in plastics as it stands. And so I would like to also, just to provoke us to think about the science underpinning this as well, and ensuring that we have independent, peer-reviewed science backing the decisions we're making in these negotiations, and being very careful and cognizant about where the evidence is coming from. It's very important for us to think about that, and ensuring that again, it's peer-reviewed, independent science.
All right, Veena, very briefly. Very briefly.
Sorry, I was actually going to say, absolutely, I do agree. You've got to have peer-reviewed papers that are published, absolutely. But I think what we haven't talked about is technologies that are emerging and up and coming, the kinds of things that we do need to have, which I think shows that rather complex plastics. I mean, the kinds of examples I'm showing you, which show that you can actually have those category 7 plastics, the ones that are considered rather difficult. So yes, you do have the PET bottles, the HDPEs, polyethylenes, but then you also have to recognize that there are many other industrial plastics like the ABSs and the polycarbonates. And I think if we've got recognition that there are many emerging technologies that allow us to put these plastics into our supply chain, then it's about controlling and having manufacturing processes that allow us to show innovation can be brought back to life, so that circularity of plastics can actually deliver high quality products. And so it's about controlling the materials, bringing them into the supply chain.
All right. Alexander, I want to bring you in here because one of the other roundtables, because I want all of our professors to talk about the roundtables before you go and take part in them, is waste minimization and remediation. A great professor once told me, I want plastic waste to be as valuable as fish. Who said that, Alexander?
Yes, we were discussing about the theory of commons, which means that when you collect a fish, it's not being possible to be caught by another person. In terms of collection of waste in the streets or even in a very organized system based on municipalities or states, this material may have a very high value and we may have competition. The definition of competition is based on the fact that we have resources that are not so abundant. Now, these resources are abundant, but in the future, it may not be so abundant. And then the competition increases, the prices increases, and the way that can be a way to work on this issue, understanding it as a common and perhaps as a commodity. In some areas, it's been considered as a commodity too. But in this way, I would like to mention some aspect that I agree that technology can be an avenue so that we can move to the future, but we need to understand that technology is not a panacea. It has solutions, but not for all. And perhaps if we consider a broad, an overarching principle of reducing the entropy of the system, technology may help, but we need also to consider other aspects to bring comprehensiveness to this chain, to this issue, so that we direct this discussion to other SDGs, for example, and merge to other important discussions that we are having in a more holistic and sustainable way, so that we can move on in a sustained approach.
Which means creating jobs, creating new jobs that allow us to create value for society, so that even the most disadvantaged communities that have been impacted, I think to bring more equity into the discussion, we've got to recognize that all of those solutions have to recognize creating those jobs. Those have to respect people, the wages that have to be paid, which means you've got to be able to create products for which there are markets, and those market opportunities have to open up. So environmental benefits and societal benefits have to come together.
Alethea, you're looking thoughtful. Before I tap into your thoughts, I'm going to tell our online audience, put your hands up. This is the Q&A section about to happen. And then I can see you online. And then in the room, if you are ready to have a conversation with our professors, please make that now. So start putting your finger on the microphone. Your mic will go green, and then I will know when and how to call upon you. Alethea, this idea of eliminating and designing for circularity, again, one of the core conversations we're going to be having today. Can you help us shape that conversation?
Yeah, well, first we have to acknowledge that technology has its limits. I mean, in order to use technology to do valorization of plastic waste, we need more elements that are not here now. We need transparency from the industry to know exactly what is going in the plastic that we are using now, and we need traceability. And also, we have to be aware that remediation has its own limits, especially with microplastics. I mean, we won't be able to remove them from the ocean soon. It's almost impossible. So we have to move from the beginning of the life cycle. And we have to have a very serious discussion about these first elements that are commonly ignored in many of the policies in the countries. Which are the unnecessary plastics? Which are the problematic plastics that needs to be banned or avoided or restricted? In order to do that, we need more information that we have now, but even with this lack of complete knowledge, by now we have enough elements to take some basic decisions. We have to move away from the convenience of disposable plastics. I mean, there's no way to solution this plastic pollution problem if we keep the actual tendency of consumption. So if we don't cut the flow, there won't be enough technology or enough remediation to solve this problem. Thanks.
Can you put your hand up if you've got a question in the room? Okay. Would you press your microphone? It's on the right-hand side. It will go red. And I think that number is 22, 23? There we go. Fantastic. Hello. Name, organization, and your question. Good morning.
Well,
We hear you. Keep talking.
My name is Carmen Capriles. I am the co-chair of the facilitating committee for stakeholders for UNEP and for UNEA. And I have a very clear question. How, after seeing what happened with the climate change negotiations, where the pollutants and the lobbyists have carried out the negative results that we have until now, how are we going to prevent these negotiations from having the lobbyists of the plastic industry not sabotage these negotiations? Thank you.
That's really an excellent question. Who wants to take that on our panel? Alicia, thank you for volunteering. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think we cannot avoid the lobbying of the industry. I mean, it will be there for sure, and it will be very strong as it has been in the climate change discussion. What we need is to have very fast clears based on science that help us to support the decision. And also, we have to be very convinced of what we want to achieve. And in this role, the governments are fundamental to get an agreement that really will lead us to a better situation that we are now. I mean, there won't be an easy way, but it's a way that we have to take.
As a social scientist, Tricia, is there something that we can learn from how climate change negotiations have been conducted, and how maybe ending plastic pollution conversations can be conducted?
Yeah, I think greater participation is probably key here for all stakeholders. I want to really, I guess, make a shout out for marginalised communities, for those at the front lines who are those that are most disproportionately feeling the effects of plastic pollution, to ensure they're in the room, they have a voice, they have full and meaningful participation in all phases of INC negotiations as we move forward. I just wanted to make a comment too, which is related to this as well. Just that, I'm a big believer in prevention is better than cure, to turn the tap off at the source, because all the things we're talking about further on down the waste stream, they will no longer be as problematic. They will be less toxic, they will be less expensive, there will be less environmental and human health impacts if we deal with production, even I would say as far as prospecting for extraction, production, petrochemicals, subsidisation of fossil fuels, subsidisation of petrochemical, dealing with this fairly small set of producers and the problematics at the top of the waste stream, so that we're not dealing with issues of human rights, for example, further down. And I also just wanted to say as well, in relation to some of the other speakers, around how important it is for just transition as well. So if we detoxify our economy, whether it's plastics or otherwise, and I want us to think beyond plastics, it's not just material for material, in terms of the solution here, it's actually perhaps zero material in some cases towards some alternative distribution systems. But if we deal with that at the top, then we're providing safer, less toxic, hopefully toxic-free materials, whereby our informal waste sector, for example, are less exposed to the problematics of plastics. And I just want to make one quick point here too at this juncture, because it is related to this. When we recycle plastics, we're actually introducing more toxicants into the product. And there's been some recent research, 2022 in fact, very recent, which shows that our recycled PET, for example, is more toxic than our virgin polymers of PET. So I think we need to really keep that in mind in caring for communities as well.
Online audience, I see you. I know nobody has your hand up right now. Do put your hand up in the next few minutes or so I can include you in our conversation. So on this side of the room, I see your microphone is green. Can you put your hand up for me? Okay, because I can't read the number on your microphone. So put your hand really high. Everyone's going to know that I'm going to talk to you, and then your microphone will go red. Fantastic. And when it goes red, you are now
thank
live.
you very much. My question is relating to the panelist. Any study or comparison on circular economy and its damages of plastic pollution on environment, human health, and biodiversity? Because you are panelists are from university, so I want to see any comparison on circular economy and its damages on environment, human health, and biodiversity. Thank you.
Good question. Who wants to take that one? Thank you, Alexander.
Yes,
go ahead.
Yeah, if I understood correctly, the question is trying to understand that the promotion of circular economy also has its own impacts or additional impacts, as was mentioned before, the recycling of products that make them more toxic, for example. I'm not very aware of recent developments in this way, but I think this is a very important way or important information that we need to envision in the treaty, so that we raise information or evidences to help us to make the right decision, because we need to reduce the impacts, whatever they are. So it's important to highlight that in the treaty.
Thank you, Alexander. Online we have Mary Kolandai. Mary, hello. Please ask your question virtually. Looking forward to hearing it. Hi, Mary. Unmute yourself. Hi, good to have you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I'm coming to you all from Sydney. I would like to go back to a point that was raised earlier from the floor about how the corporations, not allowing the corporations, to hijack the discussion or to determine the agenda. So I think that I would like to point to the tobacco industry, which has been polluting. 4.5 trillion cigarette butts, discarded into the environment, and they are made of the filters are made of cellulose acetate, and it's also toxic, and this is just dumped into the environment and causing much pollution. So there are two things here that I want to raise. One is that the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control actually has Article 5.3, which sets a precedent of actually not allowing tobacco industry to be involved in policy development, which means that countries that are participating in this negotiation, there are 182 countries who are party to the FCTC who actually have to adopt and implement this particular clause of not allowing the tobacco industry there, which means that there is a precedent which needs to be implemented. And secondly, which I think is a really important issue, which is the polluter pay principle, I think needs to be discussed. It needs to be addressed simply because the tobacco industry has never admitted liability and leaves taxpayers and leaves the government and taxpayers to clean up the mess, which just goes into billions of dollars. So I think this is something which is important. which can be addressed, and it's a low-hanging fruit which we can easily adopt in this particular forum. Thank you.
Mary, I have a question for you, because you were adding to our conversation rather than asking a question. What organization are you from, Mary? What's your affiliation?
I'm accredited to the Asian Consultancy for Tobacco Control.
Interesting. Thank you so much for your contribution. Let's go to Thomas, who is online. Thomas, thank you for waiting. Thank you for your patience. We're looking forward to your question. And then we'll go back to the plenary room for more questions from the floor. Hello, Thomas.
Hey, can everybody hear me? Good morning, first of all. I'm very happy to see the science panel. My question is more in relation to how the evidence and the science will be integrated in the negotiating and decision-making process. Thank you very much.
That's a really good question. I'm wondering, Sheila, if that's something that you should answer very briefly. You remember Sheila did our unpacking the science. How many scientists, was that right, Thomas, are involved in the decision-making process? Sheila is right here at the front. Very good. Your microphone will go red, and I'm going to ask you just very briefly to answer that. Sheila's right at the front here. Sheila, put your hand up so they see where you are. All right. There we go. Right at the front.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I think that is for member states in the negotiation process to decide. And this is a member states-driven process. Of course, the inputs that are going to come from the stakeholders are going to be key to for member states to listen and to see how to address it. And science will be one of the questions that they will need to decide on how that can fit into and feed into the negotiation process.
I'm not sure, though, Sheila, if that answers the question, and you may not be able to answer it. It may be somebody else in the room. How many scientists are involved in the decision-making process? Is it a percentage? Is it we've got 20%, 30%, 50%, or do you not know? Which is fine. We can find out that answer.
So the question is how many scientists are involved in the negotiations?
Yeah.
So that is completely dependent on member states' delegations, because remember, the stakeholder forum is the innovation space where different stakeholders will engage together and think through some of the solutions that member states may wish to consider. Then member states in their delegations may have brought in scientists to help them with the negotiation process and to think through.
Is it possible that scientists could be in the minority making decisions?
That's very much a possibility.
Okay. Tricia?
Yeah. I just wanted to add to that as well. I mean, there are some discussions around what a science policy interface might look like coming out of these negotiations, and whether or not there is one that is specific to chemicals and waste, or whether there's a separate body that might be supplementary to that, which has a specific focus on plastic pollution. And some of the discussions around the table is that actually we need one that's specific to plastic pollution, because the other doesn't necessarily cover all of the necessary, tick all the necessary boxes that we need to for plastic pollution. I'll just add as well too that we've created a group recently. It's new. It's called the Science Network for an Effective Plastics Treaty, which is also offering independent peer review and support for member states throughout the INC negotiations.
I'm just going to go through our professors who are online right now. Alethea, just very briefly, do you get the sense that scientists are involved in the negotiations to end or prevent or reduce plastic pollution? Do you feel that there's a big enough constituency that is science-based?
Well, I think that not directly at this stage. Probably later on there will be some more organized scientific participation. But even now, with this lack of participation of the scientific community, there's a lot of information that already is there. I mean, there have been a lot of groups working in this before. And so we have the science already, or most of the science that we need to begin working. But maybe what we need also is to try to translate this science to a more easily understood terms, so all the stakeholders understand what we are saying in order to have policies based on science.
All right, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions in less than 6 minutes, but we're going to do this very, very quickly. I know there are 2 at the back. Hand up really. Okay, press your button. I know you've pressed it already. We've got right at the back row, nearest to the curtain. Is your microphone green? All right, and now it's gone red. Whoever's got the red microphone, ask your question. It is a question, not a statement. It is a very fast question. Thank you. Good morning.
Excellent. Bradley Nolan from the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program. Just wanted to circle back to a comment by Tricia about the addition of more toxicants into recycled content plastic. Given the much of the conversation is going to be around circularity and recognising that recycling of plastics is a major element to this project, what is it that the people in the room, the delegates that are going to be sitting in the negotiating room, need to think about that portion of the work, because that seems to be a fairly significant issue for the informal workers that we heard about this morning and a few other things. It's a very important point that I don't think we've explored much this morning at all. Thank you.
Who wants to handle that one? Tricia, go ahead, and really briefly,
yeah,
please.
Really briefly. Okay, really briefly. I just want to also reference the work by one of our colleagues who's going to be moderating in the first in A, coming up soon. He's done work on planetary boundaries and novel entities, and the fact that plastics as a novel entity has now already transgressed those safe planetary boundaries. So I recommend you talk to Bethany Carney and her colleagues here about that, because it's totally related to the question you just asked. I would also invite people to exercise the precautionary principle where there are gaps and limitations around knowledge, because lack of knowledge can be a dangerous thing when we're talking about really toxic chemicals. So the precautionary approach, prevention, polluter pays are really important principles here to apply across the board. And I would say too that there are probably some polymers, or there are some polymers that scientists have recommended as banning or heavily restricting, and that might be polyurethane, PVC, polystyrene, and PAN, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that here because I'll get it wrong. So I think limiting what we're producing and recycling to some safe or safer polymers is really key. But also to ensure that what's being recycled, what you're going to be using it for, if it does have toxicants in it, and let's face it, all plastics do have endocrine disrupting chemicals in them, that they're not used for food and beverage contact, they're not used for children's toys, and not going to be putting them in their mouth. So that would be at least one step in the right direction to protecting humans and the environment from those toxicants in the recyclates and the microplastics that come off them.
All right, I have one more question. This is not the last of the questions. I see you at the back. I see you at the back in the middle. This is the start of the questions. We have a whole day where we're going to interact and engage with each other. But for this session, sir, I believe your number is 63.
Yeah.
There you go.
Hi. I'm Zuhair. I'm representing Children and Youth Major Group of United Nations Summer Program. I'm concerned about youth participation, and most of the time youth needs to be capacitated for participating in these kind of discussions. So my question is, what role scientists and academicians can play to capacitate young people by translating technical information into more understandable knowledge, and how they can work with governments to make sure that voices of young people are heard for strengthening government's policy positions for INC.
Alessandro, I see you nodding. Is that nodding because you want to take this question very briefly?
Yes, thank you. No, it's a very important question, and it relates strongly with all the energy that ocean decay is trying to push around the world. So we have ECOPs that are early career ocean scientists that are trying to do to improve this participation of youth in the discussions. Within countries, we have strong, extremely important movements to empower youth to participate, even from high schools, but also in the graduate and undergraduate levels. So it's highly important to have this strategy being developed within countries so that we can empower, we can engage, and then we need to create arenas, we need to create spaces where this dialogue should occur, including in the ink process. I think it's highly important to have the ideas and of youth in this process too, together with the science aspect that Thomas mentioned before. I think we have some very good examples in IPCC, IPBES, and other examples that can be the basis of something that we need to create in this process.
I would just add that we do need young scientists and engineers and professionals to really proactively get involved in research, get involved with industry, with technology across the spectrum, so that broader conversation around STEM and the importance of role of science and engineering is front and center of mind, and we start to look at all of these scientific solutions that we need, which we will desperately need as we move forward to bring forward innovative ideas and solutions to bring circularity to life.
Thank you. Alexander and Veena, Alethea and Trisha, you sparked so many questions. We could spend the rest of the day answering them, but we will not. But you did get us off to an amazing start for our roundtable, so I thank you very much for participating in this part of our program, which is Scientists Unpacking the Science. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
You will see Trisha at the roundtables. She is going to be facilitating other events and sessions during our gathering. Let me tell you about the roundtables. If you're online, very simple. We are on a plenary link right now. When we finish in the plenary session, you then click onto your roundtable link. You will have your own facilitators to have those discussions online. You will also have your own breaks and your own meal breaks. They will be self-catered, enjoy yourself catering. So that is online. In the room, next door to this side will be where the roundtables happen. Roundtables A, B, and also C, all in the same room. In order to get into that room, you need to have a roundtable letter on your badge. If you do not have a roundtable letter on your badge and you would like to go to the roundtable room, stay in this plenary space and we will do our best to make sure that you can be in the roundtable room. In order to go there, I feel like I'm headmistress right now. In order to go there, you need your interpretation device. That is because there will be 700 brains working and talking next door, behind that curtain. So you'll have your own moderator, your own facilitator, plus your headsets so that all of you can hear and talk to each other. So take your headsets to the round table. But if you are not going to the round table, put your headsets back at the end of the room where you picked them up from. Does everybody know where they are going to next? Yes. Is there a no? If there's a no, stay back here. I will give you a personal, customized guide to the next part of the program. But for the rest of us, for the next 30 minutes, you get to have a coffee break, and then the first set of roundtables start either online or next door. You deserve your coffee break. I will see you back in the plenary session later on this afternoon. Thank you.